This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. We're at the 2019 UIC Medical Cannabis Symposium at Tweed Heads. We're here with Fiona Patten, leader of the Reason Party and MP of Victoria. How are you, Fiona?
I'm great, thanks, Andrew.
Now, Fiona, can you tell us a little bit? I'm really interested in your history. How did you get into being leader of the Reason Party, which speaks volumes, I think?
I know. Well, yeah, I do like that. I think it's a great name, the Voice of Reason. It's not that common in Parliament.
Hang on, say that one more time.
Reason. It's not that common in Parliament. Yes, you only have to watch Question Time to see how unreasonable people can be in Parliament. Look, I started in government relations for an industry association that was representing the adult industry. And, we were just getting increasingly frustrated by community attitudes going in one direction and governments going in the other. And that was broadly on civil liberties. So that was on drug law reform. It was on dying with dignity. It was on censorship. It was on marriage equality. So it was a whole range of issues. And started the party in 2010 as the Sex Party, right, which was the Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll Party, of course. And then moved, just last year we changed the name to Reason. I brought out a book last year called Sex, Drugs and the Electoral Roll. Right. So now we've changed to Reason, and I was elected in 2014, and I've just been re-elected for my second term.
Okay, so you spoke just now about drugs, and I would imagine that involves quasi-illicit drugs, but also, things like pill testing, and also, you're here at the UIC, medicinal cannabis.
That's right.
So differentiating between recreational use, use amongst different genders or gender choices.
Yes.
So, gay people often use amyl and things like that. And then you've got cannabis, which is now proposed for medicinal use, not recreational use. There's a little bit of a difference. How do you navigate that little...
It's interesting. I don't actually like the term recreational cannabis.
Okay.
I think that, we don't say recreational beer.
Recreational alcohol,
or recreational wine. Yeah. So I think it's adult use. Now, people will say there's great benefits to having a glass of red wine of an evening. Yeah. And many people, particularly in jurisdictions where adult use cannabis is legal, will say that, it's blurred. The sense of well-being and the sense of relaxation that cannabis can give someone doesn't necessarily need a prescription. Of course, the work that we're doing in the medical cannabis field and what we're listening and hearing about at the conference is really exciting, and just unlocking the magic of this plant and the good that it can do to very sick people as well. I think is wonderful. But sometimes by legalising it, because it has been illegal as a plant, is the reason we haven't been able to pursue the medicinal side of it.
So I'm wondering if there's this mind change that we need to have. We talk about, alcohol is perfectly legal, perfectly accepted in our society. That's right. Probably too much so in Australian society. And we just take the bad as a bad side, but most of us do good with it. No worries. It's still a good thing, if you like, to have. But there are those people that it has devastating consequences for, alcoholism, aggression, that sort of thing. Is that what you're proposing, or how we should be proposing cannabis? That there will be some that have psychosis, there will be some that have bad effects from it, but overall it's actually a really good thing to have?
That's right. Look, we know for a fact that cannabis, on a scale of psychoactive drugs or psychoactive substances, is one of the least harmful. But all things can cause harm. And for some people, that's right, it can cause harm. But for the majority of us, it probably won't. And probably for the majority of Australians, they won't be interested in it. But the fact, in Victoria alone, the cannabis industry in Victoria is $1.1 billion. Now, where does that money go?
Yeah.
You know, it goes into the pocket of organised crime.
Yeah.
And the police recognise this. So, you know, while we're here talking about medicinal cannabis, I think it is important to talk about adult cannabis and talk about the prohibition on this plant and the effect that has had.
Yeah. I think that there's so many issues with the agriculture, the economics of this plant. I mean, this could be a cash crop that saves so many Australian farmers. And in a perfect climate that is used to that more arid climate that we're seeing at the moment.
That's right.
So, hey, 99% of New South Wales is in drought. Here's something. Here's an option. I wonder, though, if the tides of politics could change. You say reason doesn't happen in politics. I mean, the average punter, like myself, I don't understand why the politicians think they're doing it. No offence, but the major political parties think they're doing such a good job when they're so disconnected from it.
That's right. Look, it's an absolute lack of understanding, and I think that's, you know, and that's, some of that's willful. Yeah. They just put the shutters on, and they don't want to know, and they don't want to hear.
What's the mechanisms of that?
Look, I think I think many of them are very conservative, and I don't think they want to change their minds. You know, it's something that, maybe it's a general human thing that people don't like to be proven wrong. So they've got the mantra: drugs are bad. Drugs are bad.
Alcohol's a drug.
Yes, I know. Yes. It's always alcohol and other drugs, isn't it? It's never drugs including alcohol. But I think that is starting to change. And certainly some of them are having personal experiences. And we know that in 2014, when Premier Dan Andrews met some children with intractable epilepsy and saw the benefits that medicinal cannabis was providing for those children and their families, he changed his mind. And that was.
I see that this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to have to happen for them to change. It's going to have to happen to either them, their families, or somebody that they're exposed to.
I'd have to say that is something, because whenever I talk about medicinal cannabis, and I talk about it a lot in Parliament, or talk about it's curious. Like people put their heads up and actually listen, but they don't understand it. I think many of them would have met patients, but they don't know they've met a patient. Yeah. And because there still is a stigma to taking medicinal cannabis. So I'd really encourage people, particularly people who are, you know, patients or the families of patients, to write to their local members and give their personal stories, because the more personal stories that our politicians hear, the more they will understand, and hopefully the more that we may be able to grow some of the compassionate bones in their bodies that, you know, sometimes you can't see.
Yeah, that's actually encouraging to me, because it says that underneath all of the rhetoric and the politicking, there is actually a human under there.
That's right.
But they need to be exposed to it to say, this is my constituent who I'm supposed to be responsible for.
That's right.
And they're real.
Yep.
There's a real issue here.
Exactly. I took a bunch of politicians and an assistant police commissioner overseas to look at what a legal market looks like. Right. And it was fascinating. And it really did change some minds. They learned a lot. I'm not sure whether I got them, you know, some of the conservative ones, all that... Across the line. Yeah. But in that report that came out of that, there is a lot of recommendations that will provide some pathways for the Victorian government to start improving access to medicinal cannabis, but also starting to question why we prohibit a plant in the first place.
So if we're talking about constituents to local members, to then state, to then federal, is that the way it needs to change? And if that's the case, how long do we really have to wait?
I mean, I think the federal government, it's a giant beast. And it's representing the whole of Australia, and it seems to be very slow to turn. Like, it just doesn't seem to be able to do it. At a state level, we're slightly more nimble. So in Victoria, for example, we introduced the first medicinal cannabis legislation, which then nudged the federal government to get off their asses and introduce, albeit not very good legislation, but legislation. So I think the states can do this again. And I think the states, particularly around patient access, I mean, the states love having the companies moving in and doing deals with international companies and, announcing giant glass houses and giant growth, and it is exciting, but unless they provide a pathway to the patient, those businesses are going to have no one to sell to.
Well, that's right. They're just driving the elite. It seems to me they're going round in a circle. They're saying we don't want organised crime in the illicit drug market, so what we'll do is we'll make it accessible on the SAS. But it's so fraught with rigmarole, and then the patient has to buy the damn stuff.
That's right.
At such great cost that they're forced back to the illicit.
Absolutely.
It's broken.
It's completely broken, and this is while they are very pleased about the agricultural opportunities, and I agree with you. I mean, Australia is such a great place for it. We are a natural. We grew hemp. It was one of the reasons that Captain Cook and Lieutenant Banks came out here, was to look at the possibilities of cultivating hemp down here. So, but as I say, they haven't found the pathway to the patient, and I think there is things that states can do. I mean, certainly pushing for descheduling. So why we are one of the only countries in the world where you can't buy CBD across over the counter. It makes absolutely no sense. So those are things that states can either look at going alone, or they can look at really pushing the federal government to deschedule CBD at first, but then I think all THC medicine, all medicinal cannabis medicines should be descheduled.
Is one of the reasons? I mean, I know there's the fractionation issue and the ratio issue and things like that, but is one of the reasons that is preventing the descheduling of CBD oil because there's these concerns around when, say, an adult patient with epilepsy uses it, that they might have issues driving or working machinery, things like that.
Look, I think there is such a misconception. So you'll have some people that think that that cannabis or that medicinal cannabis has absolutely no psychoactive effects at all. And sometimes you don't want to break that myth. You don't want to actually let them know. But then you've got others that think that, it is all about impairment, and obviously they'll be high as a kite. They won't be able to do anything. They won't be able to work. They'll just be, eating Doritos on the sofa.
Make it at least paddle pops.
That's right. So there is that absolute misunderstanding, and I think we've also got the problem where Australia is the only country that does random roadside drug testing. So in all other countries, they've dealt with driving and medicinal cannabis through impairment laws. So if you're impaired and you're on, Valium, medicinal cannabis, OxyContin, it doesn't matter.
The issue is the impairment,
it's the
not
issue.
why.
That's right. So here, just the mere presence of THC in your bloodstream is an offence if you're driving.
Yeah.
So this, I've spoken to so many doctors who've said I could possibly triple the number of patients who would like to access these products if they're allowed to drive. It's crazy.
Absolutely crazy. So back to politics.
Yes.
And being an independent versus joining one of the major parties. One would think that the attraction to joining somebody with clout, some party with clout, would be more of an attraction than trying to be an independent. So why remain an independent?
Well, I think there's a bit of the Groucho Marx that I wouldn't want to be a member of a club that would accept me. But more importantly, I think it's the loss of conscience that you have to give up. I think you have to give up some of your conscience to join a major party.
Yeah.
And I've seen my friends joining major parties and voting on issues that I know they don't agree with, and I've seen them actually even getting up in Parliament and saying things, and you're just going, oh my.
And worse, being hung out to dry.
That's right. Oh my God, you
Peter
do
Garrett.
not. Yeah, that exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a really good example. So as an independent, I'm not the opposition, so my job isn't to oppose the government.
Yeah.
My job is to work hard to articulate and achieve the goals that I committed to doing while in Parliament. Now, to do that as an independent, you've got to work with the government and you've got to work with the opposition. And I think that's as an independent, I enjoy doing that. I like being able to work with them and negotiating. And, the other thing I've learned in politics is never let the perfect get in the way of the good. So if you can get one little reform, well,
that's the art of negotiation, isn't it?
That's absolutely. And I think that's why, I've managed to get quite a bit of legislation through. There was things that nobody thought that Daniel Andrews would ever do. And in fact, Daniel Andrews categorically said no to a number of pieces of legislation that we've managed to pass. We're moving on medicinal cannabis, and he again was very conservative about that. But I think, nudging from the outside, and I'm not horse trading my vote, but they do need my vote. So it does them well to be relatively nice to me some of the time.
So the advice for the general patient, carers out there, is to speak, get in front of your local member, in fact as high as they can.
Yes.
To keep writing, to get some personalisation.
That's right.
Then what about voting? We've got upcoming elections.
Yeah, I would again be asking that question of the candidates. So look at the candidates. How do they feel about the medicinal cannabis laws? This is particularly for federal. We've got the New South Wales state election happening right now. And I don't think either major party have been particularly good on medicinal cannabis in New South Wales.
No.
But there may be a lot of independents in there this time round. We may see some new faces. So hopefully New South Wales will change. But in the lead up to the federal election, I'd be contacting and asking the candidates what their position is.
And really presenting your personal case.
Yes, and telling your story. Those stories are so important. And just yesterday on one of the panels, we had 3 patients, some who had accessed cannabis illicitly, some who'd accessed it legally. And, just hearing those stories, I don't think there shouldn't be a politician in the, if there had been another politician in the room, none of them could have disagreed with the fact that these people have the right to try.
Fiona Patten, leader of the Reason Party and Member of Parliament in Victoria. Thank you so much for joining us on FX Medicine. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook.